We have so much to talk about, everybody. Okay, this video is insane. And it's all thanks to the snap.fan team that does all that hard work data mining these leaked cards. So not only do I have leaked cards for April, but I also got some leaked cards in March that have been adjusted and a Spotlight Cash schedule for the foreseeable future. Now, a lot of it is data mined and subject to change. And this time around, we didn't get all the data mined information that we usually do, but we were able to put together some of the pieces to come up with this, which I'll show later at the end of the video. First up is the cards. Let's get to them. With the first one up, it's Baron Zemo. Let's go! Zemo finally joining Marvel Snap. I've seen so many custom cards of Baron Zemo, so I'm really happy to see him actually joining the game. And he's going to be the April Season Pass. And he's also a 4/6 on reveal. Add the lowest cost card from your opponent's deck here on your side. So it's kind of reminiscent of something like Yondu, Gladiator, this sort of thing where you're taking something out of your opponent's deck. But the huge, insane upside with Baron here is that it's going to end up on your side of the board. And on top of that, he's a 4/6. He's good stats. So you get a 4/6 plus whatever you can conjure up from your opponent's deck. And that could be like their Hulk, or that could be their Iron Man, that could be Carnage, which wouldn't be so great. But at least you take that out of their deck. It will eat up Baron Zemo, but you know, it's not the worst thing. There can be bad rolls, but gosh, man, when people are trying to play decks on ladder, they're probably bringing good cards, which means you can take advantage of that by stealing them with Baron Zemo. It's going to be insane. It's going to be just wild. And then now we're accumulating all of these cards that can kind of pluck cards from the opponent's deck or destroy them. And there's going to be some crazy mill deck that's going to come around in the future. I swear, you can use this guy with Zabu and Wong and Gladiator, and bam, that's 4 cards out of your opponent's deck. And then you top that off with like Yondu and whatever else. I'm sure there's some that I'm not even thinking of. Cable, he like ceased to exist a while ago. And you just destroy all your opponent's cards. You take all of your opponent's cards by like turn 5. So that turn 6 they have nothing. I don't know if that's relevant, but it could be really, really fun. And Baron here is gonna help out. So I'm giving him 4 stars. I was thinking about giving him 5 stars, but I'm trying to limit that to maybe 1 card per video like this. And there's another card that I think is even more cracked than Baron Zemo, but he seems excellent. And this is the Spotlight variant with Victor Faro, who seems to be the artist for this month. Amazing art. I'm fired up for each one of these variants, so it looks great. Anyways, that's Baron. I'm excited. I'm hyped for this character in general, and a pretty neat ability. Well, let's get to the next one. Next is Red Hulk, a 6/10 when your opponent ends a turn with unspent energy. Gain, it doesn't say gain, but +4 power if in hand or in play. So this is essentially the reverse Evolved Hulk, except a couple of very important notes. One, your opponent has to pass turns with unspent energy. Not very reliable, but probably going to happen at a minimum of once in a game, okay? So I feel like we can safely say this is like a 6/14. The other huge factor is that this is +4 scaling. And that's just crazy, dude. +4 scaling tends to find a way. I used to say like, oh, +3, +4, it's guaranteed. But then you got Havoc, who's not a very good card. Yeah, he finds his way in like maybe a very niche deck. But in general, his win rate is pretty pathetic. And he gets +4 scaling. But he has an incredibly bad downside. This just doesn't. It doesn't. It just has to be in your hand or in play, similar to how Evolved Hulk happens. But if you played that deck, you get Evolved Hulk to like 20 power because your deck is trying to, you know, manage unspent energy, whereas now we're relying on our opponents. So it's actually a great counter against that She-Not deck. But it's also just good in general because I feel like more often than not, this will end up being a 6/18 with no downside, no ability that will hurt you when you play this card, making him one of the biggest splash power cards in the game, you know, without reliances. So what I'm saying there is like Infinite, you got to pass a turn. Not so great. Blob, you got to have, you know, sufficient powered cards in your deck, and then you got to hope that it doesn't hit that 15 cap right away. So it could end up being less than Red Hulk. and you might not have the cards in your deck. You probably do, but you might not. With Red Hulk, it's just gains, man. It's just straight up gains. And we stack this with like Sandman so that our opponent can only play one card on turn 6 and maybe even turn 7 if we use magic to create limbo. And right there, you've bought yourself your 2 turns, even if they didn't pass any energy the following turns before that. It's not even pass a turn. They just have to leave a bit of energy on the table each turn. This is just cracked, man. This is cracked. And look at these variants. Oh my gosh, they're both amazing. But this Ghost Rider variant, oh my goodness, man, so good. So this just seems wild. And then you throw in Iron Lad in there to copy this guy's ability. Why not? Then we're +4 scaling on our Iron Lad, and then we can get Red Hulk out there. And then you put these cards on the board. If you cheat them out with like Jubilee or Lockjaw or something like that, that's on the board. Your opponent is threatened to leave energy behind. So they're going to make suboptimal plays. They're going to be doing some weird stuff just to make sure that they're capping out all their max energy as possible so that you don't get this +4 scaling. So yeah, that's just a very big threat. It's just a big card, big power. I'm not sleeping on big power anymore. I see this guy being like a 614 at a minimum, 618, 622, and it could even be more than that. You got Collapse Mine that happens on the board, and then everybody's got to pass, leave that unspent energy. There's a lot that can happen in a game, man, to just like leave a little bit of energy. Even Project Pegasus that gives energy could end up leaving unspent energy behind. And it doesn't even matter how much. 1, 5, 6, doesn't matter. Anyways, this card seems cracked. He's my 5-star card for this Datamine session. Next up is the USAgent, a 2/6 ongoing -1 power for each of your other cards here. This is probably the least flashy, least interesting card of this Datamine, but don't sleep on it, right? I'm just going to give it 3 stars. I think that's pretty safe, mostly because this is good stats. This is 2/6, which is excellent. The negative downside is pretty, devastating. It's a reverse Captain America, essentially, but we can remove it with Sauron. That's really the deck where I see this fitting pretty exclusively, as well as with Zero and these sorts of things. Basically, what I'm thinking is you take out Lizard, you put in USAgent, or you find another card maybe, and then you add this in there. But that list is already kind of tight. You got the Shuri, Red Skull, Taskmaster. You got Ebony Maw, which is just kind of a better combo with Zero if you line it up in the right time frame. You got Sauron, Typhoid Mary, all that stuff coming together and working pretty well. I'm sure USAgent is going to fit in that deck, but it's not that exciting because you can just play Lizard instead, and that's just 1 less power. So I don't know, not very fun, but I'm sure it's going to be a decent card. It's not going to be trash. And then there's also Luke Cage that is now board wide, so that helps. You could just, maybe there's just a deck where you start just straight up running USAgent for stats, and then you got Luke Cage as your backup to save the day, so that -1 power isn't dished out. That's pretty much it for this guy, man. Maybe I'm sleeping on him a little bit, but I think he's just kind of boring, to be honest. Next is White Widow, a 2/2 on reveal at a -1 power Widow's Kiss to your opponent's side here. Now, I'll show you the Widow's Kiss in just a hot second, but man, oh man, these cards seem strong, and that definitely is just kind of a theme when it comes to Datamines. They tend to release a little bit strong, maybe to generate a little bit of hype, and then they get pulled back, nerfed a little bit prior to their release. I could see that happening with this card quite a bit, just based on the wording. I find just a little bit weird, like to your opponent's side here, this sort of stuff I just find a bit awkward. But essentially, a Widow's Kiss is a -1, and it has the ongoing ability of giving -1 power to all cards here, similar to what we were just looking at with the USAgent, except it's on something that you give your opponent. So this is very reminiscent of like Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, Debris. It's a junk card. You put some junk on your opponent's side of the board, and they're like, I don't want to deal with this. It's taking up a spot, and it's dishing out negative power, and it has negative power on its body? Like, isn't this crazy? Green Goblin costs 3, and he gives -3 to the other side. White Widow is going to give you 2 power, guaranteed -1 on the other side, so that's 3 power flip, and any other card they have there is going to get -1 power, and that's just bonus. How cracked is this? Like, I could have made this one a 5-star too, and maybe I'll change my rule about only putting 1 5-star card But man, oh man, I thought at first when I read this card that it was going to be putting the Widow's Kiss to your hand, the opponent's hand. And I was like, oh, that makes sense because it's going to be real nasty if they have to play it. You can use Dr. Octopus to pull it out or something like that. That seems balanced. This is just nuts, dude. This is just nuts. I wouldn't doubt it if they made that change, by the way. It's bookmark that one. Anyways, here's the Widow's Kiss. Just like I was saying, 1 -1. Your other cards here have -1 power. It's just wild. Maybe that should be reciprocal, like dishing the negative power to the other side too. Like I don't even know. It's just such a good junk card. And then some synergies, right? You put Man-Thing there. You give this another -2 power because it's a 1-cost card, which is just wild. And then also Green Goblin, throw it over. Then you got -4 Green Goblin. Galactus. You fill up the spot with the Widow's Kiss at that location. It's giving -1 power. That might drop it below the Galactus threshold, and then you play Galactus. Nuts, dude. Nuts. This is so wild for junk decks and just Galactus decks in general, and probably just some other nasty ways, like some honor reveals with like Grandmaster and Absorbing Man and whatever else. So you just got Widow's Kisses across the board. It'd be crazy. Of course, there's a few counters, right? You could look at like Luke Cage destroy decks to get rid of the kiss, or and nullify its effect. But holy smokes, man, that's just too much disruption, too much negative power for a low cost. Like she's got to be at least a 3, right? I don't know. Anyways. That's a 4, maybe 5. Baron was a 4, maybe 5. Red Hulk's a 5. These cards are crazy. USAgent, not quite. The next one, let's get to it. Valentina is a 2/2 on reveal. Add a random 6-cost card to your hand. Give it -2 cost and -2 power. What is happening with this month? I don't know if I'm over exaggerating these cards or not, but this seems crazy. This is another 4 that could have been a 5. And maybe I should just start putting 0.5s on these, but I find that kind of cheap. So I don't even know, dude. At this point, I'm just like blown away. I swan dive from work, put this all together. This is pretty much a first reaction to these cards, with minus a couple of combos that I thought of really quickly. So like Quinjet, right? You make your 6 cost become a 3 cost. Yeah, it's got -2 power, but who cares at this point, man? Look at all the 6 cost cards. Like you get Odin. Yeah, that's great. That's a 6 cost Odin that I can play and probably make value out of. Orca, -2 power. No problem. He's still a bunch of power. Magneto, 10 power Magneto. I'll take it. I'll take it if I'm only paying 4. A 4/10 Magneto is fine. A Hulk as well. There's just all these cards are just fine. Especially if we got Quinjet out there. Maybe we even stack that with Sarah. You put Sarah out there and it's a bunch of more discounts. That'd be just nuts. And then even on the lower power spectrum, you could look at cards like Arnim Zola. Fine, great. Probably gonna be just super surprising against my opponent, and that's gonna work out beautifully. No, maybe one of the worst ones, because if your opponent's not doing destroy, you're not doing destroy, it's not going to be very powerful. In fact, it might actually just be a -2 4-drop, which is trash. So that's where this card gets a little bit more balanced, right? Because you start to look at the highs and the lows. But my problem is I think there's way more highs with this that it's going to work out, and then it's going to feel bad because it's random, and we don't like random in our games, and Valentina could decide who wins a match or not, and that's a bummer. So I kind of don't really love cards like this, but it's crazy at the same time. I wonder if Agatha is in the pool that this can pull from. I know in certain scenarios and locations and such that they've omitted Agatha as a potential pull from certain cards and locations. So maybe they do that with Valentina, because that would be nasty. That'd actually be a huge nerf to this. All of a sudden you got a 12 power Agatha that knows she's going to play herself and playing your cards for you afterwards. That would suck. But I'm thinking we just put Quinjet out there. We use Grandmaster or Absorbing Man or Wong, and we get 2 6-drops. They become 3 costs, and we play them on the final turn. And that's just wild, right? Is that not crazy? I feel like that's pretty crazy. But then again, it ultimately comes down to the variance of what cards do you get from that random effect. And that's what matters. But whoa, geez, man. Discounts on cards, we can't count those out. Loki made great use of discounts. Is Valentina Loki? Probably not, but she's pretty wild. All right, next card. And the last card for April is going to be Red Guardian. And I'm happy to see him because he's been in Marvel Snap for a very long time, at least the Datamines. But he didn't have this stat line and he did not have this ability, so let's talk about it. So Red Guardian is a 3/4. On reveal, remove the text of the lowest power enemy card here. That can be wild. So it's a very interesting tech card that you can put into your deck. Is Iron Man running rampant in the meta? Well, all of a sudden, Red Guardian could shut that down and win a location pretty single-handedly because that's a huge power swing. Or what about Lockjaw? Lockjaw is a low power card that your opponent is investing in, playing cards there to get a big flip. Well, you could use Red Guardian to maybe snipe the Lockjaw on the same turn or the following turn if you have Prio, and then they play a Wasp there, but it doesn't swap. That can be pretty funny. I'm sure there's a bunch of other examples that I'm just kind of missing here. There could be things like Wong, you shut that down. Any of those high value, low power cards are going to be great. But there's a few low power cards that don't actually have low power once they hit the board. And that is stuff like Null, Darkhawk. So there's a few of those cards that are just going to have good power. But I'm sure there's a bunch that I'm missing that you'd like to shut down. But it does feel a little bit more niche than maybe some of the other tech cards. But could definitely be surprising and win some games. So I don't hate it. And also maybe in a Surfer build could be pretty sweet because he's a 3-drop. But I was thinking also of Absorbing Man to just like copy at a different location and shut down another card that they don't see coming. So that could be pretty neat. Anyways, I'm just leaving him with 3 stars for now. I think it's a bit of a difficult card to evaluate now until we see the meta unfold in the next couple of months and see what's popular, and that'll kind of dictate how powerful this card is going to be. So that is April's cards, but there were 2 cards in March that were changed. Let's get to them. Starting off with Hope Summers, the March Season Pass card, and she is still a 3/3, but her ability has been chopped down. After you play a card here, you get +1 energy next turn. Previously, it was +2 energy. So this is making a lot of sense. Pretty much everybody saw that card and said that's the most broken thing I've ever seen in Marvel Snap. Yeah, so do the developers. They've changed it to +1. But I am still giving this card 5 stars. This is such an easy way to get a bunch of energy turn over turn. And one thing I didn't notice when I previously talked about this card is that it is after you play a card here, it's not a one-time effect, once per turn effect. You can stack this a bunch of times. If you want 3 energy next turn, you play 3 cards at Hope Summers location, you're going to get that 3 energy. So the scaling is nuts, especially if we were to talk about cards like that Silky Smooth deck that puts like Nightcrawler, Jeff, these sorts of things, and then moves them off. We could also look at Kitty Pryde, easy one to just play there. And then it's basically one, you're scaling your power of Pride, and then you're also getting +1 energy turn over turn. So this card is still correct. I am fully confident that this is still a 5-star card. And if you're thinking, did I cheat my rule of 1 5-star card? No, because this is a different month. That's how I'm justifying it. Okay, one other card that was changed. And that card is PIXIE, now a 2/1. And the ability changed. This was a triple hit to PIXIE. That's crazy, dude. So I definitely underestimated this when I first read it. But what's new? So PIXIE 2/1. On reveal, shuffle the costs of all cards in your deck that started there. So this is a nerf on a few levels. She used to be a 1/3, a premium stat line on a 1-drop. Now a suboptimal stat line on a 2-drop. So that definitely hurts, but clearly there's some crazy shenanigans that can happen here. And that started there. I think that's for a few reasons. One, obviously being Thanos, putting the stones in the deck, and then all those shuffling around, helping you cheat out some other cards was probably an absolute problem. But on top of that, probably stuff like Subterranea or your opponent throwing rocks into your deck, and then you making use of those low-cost cards by shuffling their costs. I'm sure that had somewhat impact. So between those 2 things is probably why they clarified that started there. And then on top of that, with the stat line, I'm just not in love with this card. I maybe it's because I just don't love the randomness of it. It can be somewhat controlled, but geez, man, I just don't want to see random cards thrive in Marvel Snap. But anyway, some combos is you could have Wasp in there, so that shuffles the cost. One thing I'm not 100% confident in is the cost going to shuffle between the other cards in your deck, or is it just going to shuffle between, like, if it's Wasp, is she just going to get a random 0 to 6 and that's it? So it doesn't really matter if you build with low and high cost cards. It's just going to shuffle it up probably. I don't know. I'm not totally confident on how this one's going to work. But without a doubt, Mobius is a good combo because you can draw a card, and if it got changed to a 6 cost card, well, it doesn't matter. Mobius is going to make it to its original cost, which is great. I also think Jane Foster is pretty sick because if some cards do roll to that 0 cost and they've got high power or good abilities, you're going to draw them with Jane Foster. That would just be wild. So probably still a good card. I don't really want to like it. That's just me though. That's just me. So I'm giving her 3 stars. Okay, so that is all the cards. Those are the changed cards for March, and I'm sure more are going to change as we get closer to that month. And then all the cards for April. So let's check out the Spotlight Cash schedule for April. Warning! This is not official by any means, okay? I just try to get you guys info from what we can kind of put together here. But the snap.fan team, go check them out. Go check out their articles. Sank is such a godsend when it comes to figuring out this Datamine content. He does as much as possible, but clearly Second Dinner is tightening things up, which is kind of a bummer because it makes it harder to plan for the future. So this, take it with a grain of salt if you want. How we came to this Spotlight Cash schedule is not actually from a Datamine schedule that they have. No, it's from when the cards were projected to be released according to the Datamine. So I think the order of releases is pretty accurate. On top of that, when certain variants are set to release. That's how it kind of came to the conclusion that this is what the Spotlight Cash schedule might look like. But it's not guaranteed at all, so don't read into it too much. As well as the variants, it's just because they're new variants, and it just kind of falls into place with the release dates. So, but that is all subject to change, and they could change that at any time. Regardless, this is kind of what it seems to be looking like. And it does make quite a bit of sense to me. There's a few cards here that have not shown up in Spotlight Caches that it would be their turn to kind of turn around, like April to see cards like Blob and Sebastian Shaw. That just makes sense to me. Nico again would make sense as well. You get Jeff in there, why not? So I think this is pretty logical, especially basically what a stamp of proof that this could be legit is that there's a null variant, and that has to happen pretty much all the time with Spotlight Caches, right? So there you go. I mean, you can't deny that. So anyways, don't read into it too much, but I thought it'd be fun to share with you all. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you think about these cards, which ones you're most excited about. I want to hear it. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.